Welcome to another edition of Market Impact Insights, your podcast source for business leadership perspectives to help your business grow. Hear from experts in marketing, sales, business strategy, and more, with practical advice for business success. Make sure you won't miss the latest episodes by visiting marketimpactnow.com. Now, here's your host, Dan Albaum.
Welcome back to another great episode of Market Impact Insights. We're going to talk about a topic today that is timely, it's real, it's impacting so many of us out in certainly the marketing world, but wherever you are in an organization, and it is the recruiting landscape. What's happening with organizations? There's restructures. We're seeing it in the news all the time. We're in dynamic, fast-changing, evolving marketplace. And so how do we navigate our career path? How do we best position ourselves for success in the recruiting process? And if we are looking for talent, how should we be thinking about the recruiting experience to really make that a competitive advantage? All of those topics and more with Mitch McDermott. Mitch is a purpose-driven leader. He's a founding partner of Ascension Group. That's an executive search firm that's redefining how talent meets opportunity. And Mitch really brings a dynamic blend of entrepreneurial experience, a global perspective, a deep commitment to meaningful impact in this talent acquisition landscape. He's got huge background and experience before founding Ascension Group in 2020. He was with Artemis Search Partners as a managing director. He really developed this sharp eye for strategic placements and really creating a quality, broad network of high-performing professionals. And then before that, he worked with Ambition down in Sydney, Australia. So he's got that global perspective. And with his current leadership role, he's navigated through this really crazy, challenging last couple of years with a very clear mission, and that's to bridge the gap between game-changing talent and purpose-driven organizations. Mitch, I can't wait for the conversation. Welcome to Market Impact Insights.
Yeah, thanks again for having me, Dan. Excited to be here.
Yeah, so Mitch, let's go back. You've been on this journey, and it's been quite a while now, and you've built up so much success at being able to match that talent with organizations. But what originally sparked your passion to focus your career in and around recruiting?
Yeah, great question. You know, it's funny. It was originally my dad. He was in the business. I know you mentioned Ambition in Australia. Funny enough, I studied abroad in Australia, fell in love with it. And I told myself, if I can get the same job there that I would back home, I'll move there. And I didn't necessarily try to get into recruiting, but what happened was a door opened up for an owner of a pretty large firm in Sydney. And I met him when he was here in California, and the opportunity panned out. And I thought, this is my ticket to Australia. So got in right out of college doing sales for their firm and absolutely just fell in love with the business.
Mm-hmm. And what was that like, to get that real frontline view and experience of living in a different culture, right? From what you were used to? I mean, how has that actually played out in terms of your success as a business leader?
Yeah, great question. I think it's helped a ton. I mean, it was very different. I would call the Australian culture a blend of US work culture and Europe. So I think coming from the States, I definitely had a competitive advantage as far as like putting in the longer days, putting my career first. But I will say this, we work with a lot of international companies that are growing here in the States, and it definitely gave me more perspective of understanding cultural nuances that come from working with an international business.
Yeah. And when you also reflect back on your journey so far, what's been some of the other biggest learning you've taken from that? And have there been surprises for you along the way?
Absolutely. After starting a business, there's been a lot of surprises. I think the biggest lesson, I started the company when I was pretty young. I was only 25, and I had a lot of confidence, a big ego, and I had a lot of success early on in my career to fuel that. But I had no idea how hard it would be to get a company off the ground. I think coming into a business, which I had done at Artemis, that would around for 10, 11 years, but couldn't scale, and helping the owner make changes to scale is one thing. But starting from ground zero, no client base, no team, no revenue, and building it up to a point where then you can actually go and scale it, right? You're profitable, you have a high performing team, you have a foundation. That took a lot longer than I think it ultimately thought it would. And we grew too fast early on, which I had to learn a lot of things the hard way to kind of turn around the business to really build that rock solid foundation.
Yeah, probably just some things that you might have just taken for granted because your experience was someone had already made those decisions or felt all that pain, right? Just basic infrastructure, maybe operational process. Was it just some of that was like, whoa, man, we've got to do some really hard work here?
Yeah, it was really building a revenue foundation and a team foundation. I think when I came into the business I was at before, again, been around 10, 11 years, the client base was strong, right? You didn't have to go out and win business with no name. They had a strong brand. They had strong relationships. A lot of the changes I made to help scale the business were more around bringing in all-star performers, right? Revamping the comp plan, getting rid of some of the folks who really weren't all-stars, and then being able to kind of train and personally bring in my own people that I basically copy and pasted what I was doing as a process into theirs. We had to start from nothing, right? No client base. When I left my last company, I had a good relationship with the owner. I told him I'm not taking any clients with me. I'm not taking any team members with me. So we really started from zero with no brand, no name, no relationships that we could lean on, which, definitely took some time to build that kind of foundation.
And when you're in a position when you literally are starting with a blank slate, from ground zero, do you feel like to some degree that pressure or the gap that's there because, you need to fill the void with the messaging and the differentiation and all that, that can be a really powerful motivator to actually innovate, right? Maybe it's even more of an innovation type of culture that develops because of just the intense need. There's no inheritance that's going on there.
Absolutely. And that's a big reason why I started this company. I think I could have been the right hand of the owner at the last firm and gotten equity, and we could have had a pretty good business. But I wanted to disrupt our industry, I think, more than he did. And I had a lot of ideas of the kind of company I wanted to create. And it was obviously not my business, which led me to leave to start my own firm and kind of leverage the ideas I had to build what we're building. But absolutely. I mean, when you don't have anything, you got to get scrappy. And it opened up new channels of how to get business that I don't think a lot of our competition utilizes in order to build a business quickly.
Now, in starting something new and you're bringing people in, you're growing probably at a really, really fast rate. So it's pretty dynamic. And I've had a lot of conversations with leaders on this podcast about one of the hardest things they say they'll ever have to do is developing and maintaining a healthy culture in that new organization. It's just really tough. What's been the key for you to be able to do that now at Talent Ascension Group?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it is hard. I think one of the keys have been sticking to our floor, right? I want to bring in all-stars. And what I find is when you bring in people who aren't all-stars, it brings down your culture. It demotivates your most motivated people. And I think it's really hard to keep your floor because you end up building relationships with people who maybe aren't ultimately meant to be a part of your company for the long term. But I cut our team in half and I got rid of my co-founder, who was my best friend. The quarter after we did that, we had the biggest revenue of company history in one quarter with less than half the team we had before. What I found is when you get rid of those mediocre players, your all-stars have the space to shine. So I think really sticking true to your floor of people who either are above it and doubling down on those folks and being okay with having to move on from people who are below that floor. Another thing that's key for us is I give my people a lot of power. I was always a high performer and I didn't want to be micromanaged. I love freedom, as most high performers do. I created a culture where people earn their freedom. I don't look at hours. I don't look at how many days you're coming in. I don't mandate it once you ramp up. When you're new, we set a foundation, but we make it very clear for what you need to do to make more money, to get promoted, and to earn freedom of time and location. And it's all numerical based. It's all based on KPIs and performance. So it's indisputable. And I give our people a lot of control of their career. They want to raise or they want to get to the next level or the next commission structure. They know exactly what they have to do. And I don't get in their way. And same with remote work. Like, we're a 2-day in office company. Once you hit certain numbers, that's all we mandate. You start at 4 and you kind of earn your way to having a lot more time and location freedom based on performance. And it's worked very well for us because there's not this constant pull and push between employee and employer around controlling time and location. It's one of those things where we set the expectation up front. We show them the path to earn those types of freedoms, and then they do it on their own. So I think giving my employees the power and making it their responsibility to have the things that they want to have has been huge in building a really strong culture where we're all connected and there's no resentment against the company for things that we expect or require.
Yeah, I mean, it's really flexibility, but it's built on a foundation of some accountability in
Yes.
terms of performance. And you mentioned All-Star several times. What are really the behavioral characteristics that are really part of that definition for you in terms of an all-star player?
Yeah. One of the things I look for is people who want a career, not a job, right? People who want to build something, who want to have a big life. They have a big vision personally for the kind of house they want to have, the car they drive, right? They aspire for great things personally, where then I can create a roadmap for them in our business to achieve those things and kind of a platform for them to get their life where they want to be. I think it's for me, the biggest difference is a career mindset, right? They want to build something. They're looking at what they do for a living as intentional. It's not just a means to an end of paying their rent and, keeping their expenses there, but it's about growing toward a bigger future for themselves and then also helping us grow a bigger future for our business, right? It's kind of aligning their long-term vision with our vision for the business.
Do you find, so inside of any organization, right, you probably have a certain group that fits that all-star definition, and then others that are maybe aspiring to get there. They may not be fully there yet, but organically, have you just seen any sort of mentoring? What happens in terms of that all-star group to kind of help some other people be able to grow and develop, and so you can really grow that in a healthy way over time?
I think, I do, but I also think it comes down to the company. I mean, we work with so many different businesses, right? Some companies are Bs and they want to recruit As, but their culture doesn't breed for it, right? They offer a job. They don't offer a career. They don't have growth potential. They don't have development opportunities. And the work isn't rewarding or high growth, but they want a growth-minded person. So I think it always starts with yourself as a business leader, owner, or company of understanding what you need to become to attract what you want. Because I will say this, we've had candidates where we put them in a job and they're career minded, and in a year they leave because the long-term potential wasn't there for them to live the kind of life and career they want to have. And vice versa, right? If you can offer a career, you got to be careful of finding folks who just want a job because it's not going to be in alignment on that deeper level.
Yeah, it's really just being honest and clear and transparent as possible from both parties that are going through this. It's like coming together and doing this dance together through the recruiting process of just so that the expectations are aligned. And so often they end up not being aligned, or, the recruiting party is feeling like there was false advertising, or the hiring company feels like, oh, well, we didn't pick that up during the interviews. And so it's like how to just eliminate those nasty surprises on the back end.
Exactly. And I think, we hear quite a bit, even candidates we talk to now who aren't looking, we hear, what they sold me on and what this actually is totally different. And I think companies, you do want to sell, right? You want to attract people who are good in the interview process, but in overdoing that, you end up just putting a Band-Aid on the situation because you don't end up hiring a long-term solution because it really isn't in alignment long-term. and you end up replacing that person when they leave, 6 to 12 months later anyways. So you're better off just being honest from the start, because then at least that person knows what they're getting themselves into and will commit to that long term.
Yeah, I mean, I've even seen it through personal experience in the different technology companies I've been in, is where that pain of extending out a hiring process to make sure you're making the right decision, that pain is still better than the downstream pain of making a bad hire. I mean, it's nasty. You've got to navigate through an exit, and then you've got to restart the whole engine again to backfill. And so, yeah, and better to just get the pain happening on that front end before you make that investment to bring it in.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about this really crazy, unique time we're in, Mitch, in terms of the hiring and recruiting landscape. And I know you've got a sweet spot, certainly, of that mid-level managers and leaders. But what are you seeing emerge as some of the key skill sets that are really positioning candidates for success and for hiring companies to be able to win, in terms of bringing in to their companies?
Yeah, skill sets vary a lot based on the function and the role. But one of the things I'm seeing a lot of right now, and we work mostly with middle market, fast growing companies, because I think the size of the company, the profile of the business, they're going to look for different things, but they really want growth focused people. They want people who have proof of concept, right? Like we're working with a client today who's at a certain revenue size, and they want to triple that in the next 3 years. And what we're doing is essentially finding people who have already done that. So finding folks who have stood up processes, stood up functions, improved functions, who can take companies into kind of the next version, let's call it version 2.0 of that business. I would say that's the most in-demand skill set is proof of concept in taking an organization from A to B.
So part of that probably needs to be there's competency and actual functional skills, but then there's also just the mindset that would embrace change and be comfortable with change, right? And it seems like that's something that you can flesh out if you really do your due diligence and you're interviewing well. You can kind of get at where someone's at on their tolerance scale, right, for change.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think with how much change we've already seen in the last 5 years and how much even just in 2025 alone, the change that we've seen is finding adaptable leaders is key. And also people who have the emotional intelligence to lead, because I think with AI, with some of these other trends we're seeing, right? The one thing we can't replace is human connection. And I'm seeing the skill set of actually being able to influence people by creating a following versus influencing through authority being a skill set that is going to be more and more important as we look forward, and a trend that I'm already starting to see start now.
Yeah, and oftentimes, even in a company that is still growing and maturing, it may end up being more of a matrix structure anyway, to where you really need to just structurally need to be more of an effective influencer than having any sort of organizational chart domain over people. You've got to influence and motivate across an organization as a leader without that benefit, or I guess the convenience of saying, well, they were reporting to me. So and that's one too, that I would think in the recruiting process of trying to get that candidate to share examples that are measurable where they've been able to do that is probably golden.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We always try to look for past evidence is what I call it. Getting the story, hearing, what they did, the transformations, another skill set too, I'd share with you, especially at the mid-level. VP is a little higher, but especially director, one of the skill sets companies are looking for is someone who's hands-on, because I think as we're seeing, right, we're seeing companies shrink middle management. They're simplifying their org charts, and they're looking for leaders who can lead, but they're not just sitting behind a desk with their feet up. Like they're able to roll up their sleeves, get their hands dirty. I'm seeing a lot more of these, true hands-on types of leaders being something that companies are seeking right now. Because again, companies I think they overhired during COVID, and now they're looking at how can they run more efficient businesses, and they want leaders who can get in the trenches with their team a little bit more.
One thing that is much talked about is in that balance in the relationship that happens through a recruiting process, where certainly the company is trying to best determine capabilities, skills, and fit with culture and all that good stuff through their questions and how they handle the interviews. But sometimes it feels like candidates, they should be viewing the same thing, to where that they should be holding the company accountable to kind of demonstrate why it is a good fit and worthy. And sometimes maybe when that's put in the back seat and not done well enough, that's where you get the misalignment, right? Because you weren't curious enough, you didn't probe enough to really determine if there was a good fit for you, because it's a decision on your part, hopefully too. It's not just the company's choice.
Yeah, I actually started a coaching group for people who are out of work because personally, I just believe the way job search was done 5 years ago doesn't work anymore. And I was giving them different kind of disruptive frameworks and tactics to get in front of the kind of companies they want. And one of the things I coach these people on, and these are directors, VPs, hadn't looked for a job in 15 years, part of big layoffs, is I told them, you want to go into the interview like you already have a job you love. And you want to know if this is better for you, even if you're out of work, because you don't want to settle. So I completely agree with what you said. I think interviews, when done right, should be qualifying on both sides. I look at it like a first date, right? Both people sitting on the opposite side of the table are looking at each other to wonder if this is a relationship worth investing more time in.
Yeah. And just carrying yourself with that confidence of saying that, yeah, you should have a standard too, and not settle. But it gets hard, right? If you've got months, or sometimes I'm seeing 1 to 2 years, people out there trying to find that next role. It's hard not to, it's a human emotion, right? To be a little desperate and just want to grab at anything. So where else are you seeing some of those job seekers struggling in maybe even through some of the group conversations that you're having, with
Yeah.
those people?
Yeah. And I was surprised about how much of time I spent on mindset. I think you're right. It's coming from a place of scarcity. And I think energetically, you can read that. You can read it through an interview, how someone shows up. It affects their confidence. So I think struggling with keeping their head in the game, right? Coming from a place of abundance, even if this is the only interview you've had in 3 months, showing up like it's one of 5 that you have this week, and being able to have some mental resiliency to qualifying the business and showing up at their best. I think another one is people take the easy route. It's really, really easy to apply for a job. That's why now most jobs have hundreds of applicants. And that's why most people don't hear from companies, because the companies are now leveraging technology to screen. Candidates are now using technology to apply on a mass level and redo a resume. I think understanding how to actually get in front of companies. And one of the things I talked about in my coaching course was treating the job search like you're in sales, right? Doing cold outreach, identifying companies you'd love to work for, identifying key decision makers, not HR recruiters, but the person who would actually hire for your type of role, and building those relationships. Almost like how you got a job before LinkedIn, before Indeed, right? I mean, I'm sure you remember the days where you walk into an office and you hand reception your resume, right? Those things in today's world are how you get seen and how you get noticed. Applying is a really, really good way to spend a lot of time getting very minimal outcome.
I'm curious, because something that I've seen a debate back and forth, and it's a small act, but I've always felt like it meant a lot. And that was showing gratitude. So when you go into an interview and this debate over, do thank you notes matter, or emails or acknowledgement, all that. What says Mitch on that topic?
Yeah, 100% you should be sending thank you notes. It's something that even I would look at when I'm hiring for myself. But it's interesting. The norm has shifted. Before, that was a standard thing. If you don't send a thank you note, you're almost automatically disqualified from the process.
Yeah.
Here's what I would tell someone. Why not do everything you can to advance yourself and put yourself in the best position? If thank you notes are no longer that standard, why not go above the standard and show them that you're someone who goes above and beyond what the norm is? So I always encourage people, always send a thank you note. If you're interviewing with 3 different people, send each of them an individual one. make it personal. It doesn't need to be more than 1 or 2 lines, right? Just something that acknowledges the time and connects to something that you guys personally discussed in that conversation. Because what people forget is the thank you note is not just a checkbox, but it's also an opportunity to continue building rapport.
Yeah. And just don't leave that conversation. If you don't have their email, ask for it. I mean, that's totally fine, right? Hey, in case we need to follow up, can I get your email? And I don't think, in my experience, I've never had someone say, no, I'm not going to give you my email.
I've had candidates get off an interview and say, I didn't ask for their email. And I said, did you open the invite? Because you were on an invite.
It's probably in there too.
Right there, right? It's not that hard to find.
So either way, just make sure that you're tracking to it. And we've got to get into this topic, Mitch, because everybody is there, and that's AI, right? And the impact of AI around recruiting and hiring going forward. Where are we headed with this?
Yeah, I think we're headed for a little bit of a correction. I think we've become over reliant on it. I see it happen all the time. I think AI is a lot of the problem we're seeing in the hiring market right now, right? Because it's too easy to apply. It's too easy to screen 500 people without a person looking at a resume. Here's what I think, though. Hiring has always, and in my opinion, will always be human, deeply human. We're talking about people working with people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Companies that have a culture, that have values, right? They embody the same characteristics as a person, right? The culture is the personality, and someone's either going to mesh well with that personality or not. And I see an over-reliance on technology because it's easy, it's efficient, but I also see the results aren't leading to efficiency. Roles are open a heck of a lot longer. People out of work a heck of a lot longer. So yes, it's a tool that makes life easier, but by over-relying on it, there's no efficiency in getting the outcome you're looking for. There's just efficiency in doing the work. So I do think we're headed towards a little bit of a correction. I mean, I've seen it. We've placed candidates where our team contacts them, they vet them out, we put them in front of a company, the company's interested. Well, guess what? They applied 90 days ago and never got a response. The challenge with AI is it screens for words. It doesn't evaluate the resume as a person. It doesn't look for the story, right? You could say, hey, filter out for job jumper. What AI might not realize is, hey, this company was acquired 3 times in the last 5 years. They've been at the same company for 5 years under 3 different names.
Right. Yeah. They're just the nuances, right? That a human perspective and kind of a deeper kind of lens would actually allow you to do that kind of evaluation. I think that's where a lot of the frustration is from the candidates, of feeling like we're not even getting our shot at a seat at the table based on these kind of initial, perceptions from the AI system. And so it seems like there's just a lot of emotions that maybe at both ends right now in terms of, is the process broken? Does it need to be fixed? How do we kind of come back through that correction?
Yeah, great question. And it starts with a fix on both sides, right? People apply. I talk to people all the time. I applied to 150 jobs this week. Did you look at the job? Did you look at the company? Are you just basing it off a quick search on LinkedIn and it has a title that sounds like your title? So I think part of the correction is people actually applying for jobs they want. They've done the research. There's intention. They looked at the company. They looked at the role. Like, it's truly a match for what they want and what they can offer. Because right now the problem is there's a lot of applicants that aren't relevant, just hitting apply. And guess how the companies respond? Well, we don't have time to go through 500 applicants, so we're going to use technology to screen. So I think the fix is on both sides. It's being intentional with how people look for jobs and what they apply to. And then companies being able to understand that, hey, if we really want to hire the right people, we need a human lens involved in this process. We're going to need a human lens to really look through these resumes and evaluate this on a deeper level than just keywords and checkboxes. But I think in some ways it starts with how people apply. I think that's where the problem started, was people just mass apply to things. I have interviews. I had 250 applicants. 10 of them I did phone calls with. I personally reviewed each one. 10 actually matched on paper what we said we were looking for, our requirements, our budget. I had conversations with some of those 10 people who said, what company is this again? We set up a call, we scheduled, they didn't even take the time to do the research. So I think the problem started there. And then the technology of AI screening was the reaction. So I think the first way to solve this problem is be intentional with your job search. Don't apply to everything. Be selective and don't just apply, but figure out how to get in with the company. Pick the top 50 jobs that you would love to work for and spend your time getting one of those instead of looking at the plethora of opportunities on LinkedIn and taking a volume-based approach.
Yeah. And there's probably never been a more valuable time than right now to leverage relationships and your network and try to get an introduction in, not just the blind application.
Exactly. And that's part of the strategic stuff that we were talking about is, leveraging. There's so many tools now with LinkedIn and other things to be able to build your network, but also see who that knows the person you want to know, and be able to trade favors with people to build your network.
What do you think separates truly exceptional leadership from just good enough?
Yeah, I think good enough leaders, I call them managers, right? They keep the wheels on the bus. They're there when you need them, but there's nothing exceptional. I think exceptional leaders look at their employees as individuals. They take the time to understand what that person wants, what motivates them, and they customize that person's employment experience at that company, and they show them how they can achieve those things with them. And then they're there along that journey to develop the person into who they need to become to achieve the things that they want.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Mitch, what's the best piece of business advice you have ever received?
This is a good one. It came from my grandpa, who was actually a president of the chemicals division at Merck a long, long time ago. And he always told me this: if it seems too good to be true, it probably is.
So kind of a healthy skepticism, if you will, around how you evaluate, any situation.
Yeah, and I've seen it happen where clients go, "Hey, we want to hire you for 20 roles." And I go, "Wow, that's huge." And then when you get in with the company, you realize it's a vendor relationship. There's no partnership. They want to put butts in chairs, and you realize out of those 20 opportunities, you might not even have success on one. I've seen this happen in different ways where something seems really, really good, almost too good. And oftentimes I found sometimes it is.
Yeah. Scratch beneath the surface so that you're going into any new opportunity with your eyes open.
Exactly. And that saved me from a lot of things too, and a lot of wasted time and resources.
So when you think about the future, what makes you optimistic?
I'm really excited to see what our world looks like in 10 years. I think there's a lot of change, some bad. I think there's going to be some good coming. But I think we're going to be in a place in the next 3 to 5 years where humanity becomes a priority again. I think technology is changing so aggressively that we've gotten very reliant on it. And we're going to be probably more reliant for the next few years. But I do think there will be a little bit of a revolution around humanity again in face-to-face relationships, shaking hands. I think as humans, we're deeply connected species, right? We want to interact with people. And I think that makes me optimistic. And I think that's something I'm very proud about with our model of recruiting, is that we take a very deeply human approach to how we do things.
Yeah.
And I think I'm starting to see a shift in the current, and people wanting connection, people wanting to know that they can trust that there's a human on the other side of that email or the phone. And that makes me excited about the future.
Yeah, I think there's just something inherently unpredictable when you try to project 10, 20, 30 years out. I always think of, there was a slew of movies that came out in the 1990s that were future-based of what they projected and thought the world might look like in, say, 2025 or 2030. And it's always interesting to go and see, okay, what did they get right? Where were they totally off, right? In terms of their best guesses. And so the reality is, as much as we think we know and can predict, just know that that's just part of the human existence, that there's always an element of unknown, even 5 years out, let alone 10 years or longer.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually follow a lot of the futurists, and some of them have been pretty accurate. But yeah, there's always going to be curveballs and things that come out of left field that we'll never be able to predict. But no, I'm excited looking forward, even at the next 12 months, 24 months. I think I feel like there's been a lot of shifts since COVID, and I feel like I'm sensing things starting to even out, right? The market was very employee heavy for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's becoming a little bit more employer heavy, and people are starting to appreciate what they have a little bit more, because having a job means more today than it did in 2021 when companies were offering 30, 40 grand more to people just to get them over the fence. So I think I'm seeing everything kind of normalize back to the middle. And I think that's going to happen a little bit more next year. I'm already seeing a big uptick in companies hiring again. So I think by kind of mid next year, the world will have kind of settled in the employment space. And that makes me excited too, because I think it's been the Wild West the last 5 years.
Yeah, we're all taking a deep breath now and trying to recalibrate. Do you have any other final advice for leaders that are looking to take the next step in their careers, or they're trying to make the right high impact hires?
Yeah, I think for people that want to make high impact hires, the one advice I always give is interview the person, not the resume. A lot of times we see leaders look at the resume, make a lot of assumptions, and either interview someone or not based on the piece of paper. And sometimes those assumptions aren't true. So I think, really when you have someone sitting in front of you, the piece of paper is a guideline. It's a reference. They wrote it themselves, but really get to know the person on the other side of the table. The person's what's going to dictate success. The resume is only half the battle. And I think for people who want to take the next step in their career, like I said earlier, be intentional. Really be selective about what you want. Get clear on what you want and go out and find it, and be willing to put in the work to get the opportunity that you really desire and not settle. Don't subscribe to the volume game of mass apply, click, 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 but really take ownership of your job search, because that's what's going to get you the best output. It's going to be a lot more input, but if you get a job you love and you find a company that you can call your home for the next 5 to 10 years, you've won.
Well, Mitch, thanks for sharing your journey as really a founder of a very successful and growing and thriving recruiting business, and just lessons that all of us need to take in and really help us navigate through this unprecedented time and opportunity in the recruiting process. Really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, me too. Thanks again for having me, Dan.
And a reminder, please continue to give the gift of feedback to help make this podcast even better. You can do that by going out and giving a rating and a review. It's so easy to do on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast and Spotify. And as always, make sure to visit marketimpactnow.com for the latest in business leadership perspectives. So long until next time.